Tom Mulcair now. He's CTV's political commentator and the former leader of the NDP. Tom, good morning. Good to see you after a summer break.
Good to be with you, Marcia.
And here we are with a big story to discuss. Let's start by getting your reaction. Do you think that after a year of negotiations, a deal should have been reached by now?
I think a deal could have been reached, and it's trickier today than it used to be in the past. This is the first time both railroads are shut down at the same time. It's also interesting, as you correctly point out, that it's a lockout by the employer. Now, collective bargaining since the Charter of Rights has been determined by the courts to be sort of a subset of freedom of association. You have a right to bargain collectively. So it's not like in the past, Marcia, where the government could be called back, Parliament could come back and simply pass back to work legislation. You can't do that automatically anymore. You have to respect the process and you have to have reasons. But when you look at the legislation that exists across the country for what are called fundamental, essential services for the public, you're usually talking about schools or more likely police or health. But what could be more essential to a country like Canada that is spread out thousands of kilometers east to west than the railroads that move everything and tie us together? And as we just correctly pointed out, in large cities, whether it's in BC or in Montreal, that lockout is affecting people's ability to get to work because, of course, the commuter trains are shut down. So it's having that ripple effect across the country. It doesn't help Mr. Trudeau that his Labour minister is a rookie. He's brand new on the job, Steve McKinnon. I'm sure he's otherwise a capable fellow, but he's brand new to the job. And our transport minister, Pablo Rodriguez, has already indicated that he wants to leave to run for the Quebec provincial Liberal leadership. So it's a heck of a situation for the government right now, but there are tools in the government toolbox, and they're going to have to start using them because obviously this can't continue for very long.
What are those tools, and what would force the government's hand to use them?
Well, I think that the government's hand is going to be forced within the next few days because you can't have this lockout continue for much more than that. You've got to start to keep the economy rolling. And in this case, it is literally an economy that rolls because of the size of the country. We're the second largest country in the world, and we can't do without the railroads. And everybody knows that. Now, the labor unions are saying, look, especially in the case of one of the railroads, they're saying they're asking for things. It's what they're pushing for, the changes that they're pushing for that would actually reduce our wages and working conditions. For example, the ability to move people from place to place around the country. So they're digging in their heels on that. The railroads, I have a feeling, are just saying, look, we know how essential we are. The government's going to have to move in, so we'll just lock them out and twiddle our thumbs and wait for the government to move in, and then we don't get blamed for it. But in the meantime, I think there has to be a reflection in this country about how we get to this stage and what we can do to avoid it in the future, because it's not just the freight that's being held up, of course. As we mentioned, it's the people's ability in our largest cities to move from place to place. It's businesses that won't be working. So it's a hit to the economy. And I just think that if the government has fallen asleep on this, when they do have the ability, for example, to push for a more binding arbitration, they can push and they can use the tools that they have to push for that result. But they seem to have said to themselves, we're just going to sit back and let this one take place. I don't think that that's a constructive approach, frankly.
Why is that? Is it because they don't want to upset the unions?
I think that sincerely, Mr. Trudeau, since the beginning of his mandate, he's been there for 9 years now. He has shown a tendency to respect, and it's a good thing, the collective bargaining process because it is a fundamental right. But at the same time, when you're dealing with something that is this essential to the country and its economy, you have to take a longer view of things. You have to see things in advance. But it's the summer. There's not much going on. The government doesn't seem to be very present. And they've just stumbled into this situation where, quite legally, the railroads have locked out their workers, but it's a devastating result for Canada and for Canadians. And that's why the government has to start showing that's a little bit more present than it has been in the lead up to this lockout.
Tom Mulcair for us this morning. Welcome back, Tom.